Joining me now from our nation's capital is Deborah Bronson, climate scientist and environmental risk consultant. Deborah, it's great to have you on the show this morning. And we saw 2025 kick off with that devastating wildfire in Los Angeles. What role has climate change had in the frequency of these occurrences?
Yes, that fire was terrible in Los Angeles, and my heart goes out to everybody affected and hope they are recovering. Oh, climate change does not cause these fires in California or in other areas, but it has a major role to play in how frequently they occur and in the strength of those fires. And I think the Los Angeles fire is a great example. So the Los Angeles fire happened when rainfall patterns had changed, in part due to climate change. So we had more extreme rainfall, and then we had longer periods of drought. On top of that, you had temperatures that were 3.3 degrees above normal. And then you had the Santa Ana winds. So you had drought, you had winds, and then these fires erupted, and they literally spread so rapidly. It was incredible, and nothing could have stopped them. At the same time, we have more people living in harm's way of climate change. So when you bring those two together, it really is a perfect storm for more extreme events from climate change, but more people, more industries, more businesses being affected directly by them. And we're seeing this happen across the country, from flooding, from storm surge. So it is a pattern that's accelerating.
According to NASA, Deborah, Earth saw an unexpected level of sea rise last year. What do we know about that?
So a recent study from NASA said sea level rise in the last year had risen by, I think, by 0.0224 inches. Which is about twice as high as we might have expected. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you realize that over the last 30 years, sea level rise has risen nationally by about 5 inches, 6 inches if you live in Florida and the Gulf Coast, that is a huge effect on coastal communities. So a 6 inches sea level rise means that beaches are eroding. We've got less beach, less sand on the beach. The other thing we're seeing is more high tide flooding. So we have about twice as much high tide flooding than we had 20 years ago. And this is without any storm surge, without any rainfall. So the impact of sea level rise is being felt literally around all coastal communities. And some of those coastal communities are dependent on up to 80% of GDP on beach tourism. So property damages, tourism, and basically quality of life are being affected by sea level rise.
Well, the U.S. is coming off its coldest January in 37 years, and I can tell you, even on technically the second day of spring, Deborah, it still feels cold here on the East Coast.
Yes.
Parts of the Hudson in January actually froze over. The world collectively certainly coming off, though, the warmest January. So a dichotomy here between what we see. Why are we seeing such a wide range of these weather conditions?
I think what you just described is climate change. I was in New York when it was freezing. I totally agree. It was absolutely icy. So I think climate change got off to, if you like, a bad start. It was called global warming. And it is that the atmospheric temperature is heating up. But the impact of that means more extreme weather, no matter where you are. So in some areas, it means you will have more extreme periods of cold and much colder than you had previously. In others, it means hotter temperatures, drier temperatures like California. And we're even seeing, like snow in Florida. It wasn't caused directly by climate change, but the melting Arctic created the kind of conditions that would lead to the polar vortex going south and conditions for snow falling on Florida. Now, it's rare, it may become more frequent, but it's these more extreme conditions and the higher frequency of those more extreme conditions is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So it's not that everywhere's getting hotter.
Well, Atlantic hurricane season starts on June 1st, just about 2 months away. What impact does climate change have on the intensity of these storms?
So climate change is having a huge impact on the intensity of the storms, and that's mainly through the temperature of the water. So what we've been seeing is the ocean temperature getting hotter and hotter. Now, our oceans have absorbed about 90% of the excess heat from global emissions. So the oceans are hotter. 2023 was a heat wave. 2024 was a heat wave. January of this year, the ocean temperatures were about 2.4 degrees warmer than they would be on a normal January. So we're getting started in a hot year already. When the ocean temperatures are hot, that's what fuels the strength of the hurricanes. So the hotter the temperature, the faster the hurricane intensifies and speeds up. And that is our concern for 2025. We saw it last year with Hurricane Milton. Hurricane Milton went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in a day. That's an increase of 90 miles an hour over 24 hours. That is almost unprecedented. Normally we would think of days or weeks for that, but our concern is the speed at which these hurricanes will intensify.
Deborah, thank you so much for joining. Of course,
Pleasure.
always an important conversation to have. That's Deborah Brosnan, climate scientist and environmental risk consultant.